Snow whipped through the empty streets, hissing against shuttered shopfronts and glass doors chained shut for the night. The Chicago bus station loomed dark, its metal gates pulled down, its neon sign half buried under drifting snow. On the frozen bench outside, Lena Brooks huddled with her children. The twins, 6 years old, pale and trembling, pressed into her sides, their small coats no match for the storm. She pulled her scarf tighter around them, though her own hands were raw and cracked from the cold. Her phone glowed weakly in her palm, battery nearly dead. She scrolled with numb fingers, trying to find her cousin's number. Somewhere safe for just one night, that was all she needed. Her eyes blurred with exhaustion. One digit slipped. She hit send before realizing. Lena, please, we're stuck. I don't know what to do. The twins are freezing. She stared at the screen, waiting for the typing dots that never came. Miles away, in a high-rise that cut into the storm above Lake Michigan, a man left a boardroom full of tired executives. Daniel Hayes checked his phone automatically, expecting another email, another demand. Instead, her name, Lena Brooks. The message stopped him cold. 7 years had passed since he last saw her. 7 years of walls built high and silent. Yet here she was, her words trembling across his screen like a voice he thought he'd lost, and attached her location. Daniel hesitated, then turned on his heel, heading straight for the elevator. Daniel's car cut through the snow as if the storm itself parted for him. The city was nearly deserted, wind howling down empty avenues, traffic lights swaying on their wires. When he pulled up to the shuttered bus station, his headlights swept over the icy benches. There, 3 figures huddled together. He stepped out into the cold, breath clouding instantly. The snow crunched under his polished shoes as he walked closer. The woman raised her head at the sound. Her face, pale under the orange glow of the street lamp, stopped him. Lena. Her name escaped like a memory. She blinked, startled. Then recognition broke through her exhaustion. Daniel. Her voice was hoarse, disbelieving. For a moment, time folded in on itself. 7 years dissolved, leaving only the sharp edges of unfinished sentences, of nights they had never spoken of again. But then a small cough shattered the stillness. The boy, curled against Lena, his eyes glassy with fever. The girl pressed her mittened hands over her mouth, shivering violently. Daniel froze, their eyes so achingly familiar. Blue-gray, the exact shade that stared back at him in the mirror every morning. Lena pulled the children closer, as if shielding them from him. "We'll manage," she said quickly, her voice tight. Don't trouble yourself." But even as she spoke, the boy bent forward in a deep coughing fit, his small body racked with effort. Panic flickered across her face. She rubbed his back with trembling hands, whispering words of comfort that did little against the raw sound. Daniel's throat closed. He remembered being that boy, winter nights in a drafty house, lungs burning, his mother keeping vigil with steaming cloths and sleepless eyes. He had carried that weakness into adulthood, a shadow he rarely let anyone see. "Get in the car," he said quietly. "No," Lena whispered, shaking her head. "We just need." "Get in the car," he repeated, more firmly this time. His eyes held hers, not with command, but with something else, something she could not quite name. The twins coughed again. The storm raged, and with a broken sigh, Lena allowed him to guide them toward the waiting warmth of his world. The headlights cut a harsh beam across the frozen bench, and for a moment Daniel thought he was seeing ghosts. Lena sat hunched forward, arms curved protectively around 2 small shapes bundled in mismatched coats. Snow clung to their lashes, their cheeks raw with cold. The boy stirred first, turning his head toward the light, and that was when Daniel froze. The eyes, gray-blue, storm-shadowed, the exact reflection he saw every morning in the mirror. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The boy coughed, a sharp, rattling sound that made Lena pull him closer. The girl shifted too, lifting her head just enough for Daniel to catch her gaze. Same eyes, same impossible familiarity. He felt the ground tilt beneath him. "Daniel," Lena's voice cracked, half disbelief, half warning. He opened his mouth, but nothing came. The words tangled against the surge of memory. 7 years of distance collapsing into a single truth staring back at him. The girl clung to her mother's sleeve. The boy's cough deepened, shaking his thin frame. Daniel took a step forward, but Lena's hand shot up. "We'll manage," she said quickly. Her tone was sharper than the wind, her eyes pleading with him not to ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Manage," Daniel echoed softly. The words scraped against him. These children were trembling in sub-zero air, lungs straining with sickness, and she was asking him to believe they would somehow manage. The boy doubled over, coughing into Lena's shoulder. Panic flared across her face despite the mask of resolve. She rubbed his back with frantic circles, whispering, "Shoo, baby, it's all right, Mommy's here." Daniel's chest tightened painfully. He remembered nights exactly like that. His own mother bent over him, whispering the same words, praying for the cough to break. The storm swirled harder, snow biting at exposed skin. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Lena, get them in the car." She shook her head, clutching the children tighter. "No, we'll find a shelter." "You don't." Another cough tore through the boy, raw and hollow. The sound cut through every layer of Daniel's restraint. "This isn't about me," he said, his voice sharp now. "It's about them. They need warmth. They need a doctor." Lena's lips parted, but no protest came. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of exhaustion. She looked down at the children, then back at him, and something in her eyes fractured. "All right," she whispered. Daniel moved quickly, opening the car door, guiding them in. The twins collapsed against the leather seats, too weary to protest. Lena slid in after them, her face pale, her hands shaking. When Daniel closed the door, the cold night sealed outside, and for the first time he allowed himself to draw a breath. But it came shallow, heavy with the sight that would not leave him. 2 pairs of eyes, mirrors of his own, staring back at him through the storm. The elevator doors whispered open, and Lena stepped into the penthouse as if crossing into forbidden territory. Her boots left melting trails on polished stone, and she pulled the twins closer, wary of every detail. The glass walls overlooking the city, the soft rugs, the way silence lived comfortably here instead of pressing like a burden. "This is just for tonight," she said immediately, her voice too quick, as though the words themselves might shield her from the weight of what accepting his help meant. Daniel didn't argue. He simply took their coats, draping them across a chair. "Tonight is enough." The twins stood frozen at the threshold, their faces pale from cold, their small breaths rising like clouds in the warm air. The boy glanced at the floor-to-ceiling windows with wide eyes, while his sister tugged at his sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, "we can see the whole city." Lena hushed her gently, guiding them toward the couch. Their movements were slow, cautious children who knew not to touch what wasn't theirs. Daniel disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, the rich aroma of broth drifted into the room. He set steaming bowls before them with quiet care. "Eat," he said simply. The twins obeyed without hesitation. Their spoons clattered, their small hands unsteady but desperate. Lena tried to slow them, wiping spills, murmuring reminders of manners. Daniel said nothing. He only watched, something heavy shifting behind his eyes. When the bowls were empty, he returned with blankets, soft, heavy wool. The children curled beneath them instinctively, their bodies sinking into cushions too deep to have ever known before. Within moments, their breathing steadied, eyes fluttering closed. Lena exhaled, a sound between relief and guilt. She stood apart, arms folded tightly, gaze locked on the skyline. "You can rest too," Daniel said from across the room. She shook her head. "I can't. We'll be gone at first light." He studied her for a long moment, then looked toward the boy, who stirred in his sleep. The cough came again, sharp, chest deep. Daniel flinched at the sound. "I know that cough," he murmured, almost to himself. Lena's eyes snapped to him. "When I was his age," Daniel continued, I kept my mother awake every night with it. She sat at my bedside until morning, hoping each fit would be the last. They said I'd grow out of it. His voice dropped, softer now. I did. But I remember. The room went still. Lena's jaw tightened as though holding back words she wasn't ready to speak. Daniel didn't press. He turned instead to the windows, the city a blur of snow and neon below. His reflection hovered beside hers in the glass. "You're not alone tonight," he said quietly. Her shoulders sagged, just slightly, the fight inside her dimming with exhaustion. She didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. Behind them, the twins slept deeply, wrapped in warmth they had never known. The cough subsided into quiet breaths. And in that silence, Daniel realized that what had begun as an accident, a mistyped message, was already reshaping everything he thought he'd left in the past. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and steam heat, the kind of air that clung to clothes and reminded Daniel of childhood winters in waiting rooms. Lena sat stiffly beside him, her hands clasped too tightly in her lap as the twins were examined. The boy's cough had worsened through the night, and even Lena's resolve had cracked beneath its hollow weight. Daniel hadn't asked permission. He had simply lifted the children into his car and driven straight through the storm. She hadn't argued. Not this time. A nurse entered with a clipboard, her smile efficient, practiced. "Mr. Hayes, we'll need your signature here for consent." She didn't hesitate. She assumed. Lena's breath caught. "No, wait." But before she could move, Daniel had already taken the pen. His name curved across the page in steady ink, unshaken. When he handed the clipboard back, the nurse offered a warm nod. "Your son's lungs are irritated but not infected. With medication, rest, and proper warmth, he should recover quickly. Your daughter shows no symptoms, but we'll monitor her. Your son. Your daughter." The words fell heavy, louder than the whir of the machines, louder than the storm still howling outside. Lena could hardly breathe. She watched the twins being settled into small beds, their small bodies wrapped in blankets that smelled of detergent and safety. Daniel stood close by, hands loose but posture taut, every movement instinctive, protective, natural. When the nurse left, Lena pulled him into the corridor, the fluorescent light washing both of them pale. "You shouldn't have signed that." "I should have," Daniel said evenly, though his eyes burned. "I don't care what papers say. I was here. I am here." Her hands shook as she pushed them deep into her coat pockets. "You don't understand. I didn't tell you because it wasn't safe. Not safe." His voice hardened. "For them. For all of us." Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. "Do you remember Victor?" The name struck like a knife. Daniel's stepbrother. The one who thrived on control, who twisted every inheritance, every deal, every secret into power. "I found out I was pregnant," Lena whispered. "I wanted to tell you. I tried. But Victor knew before you did. He came to me. He said if I stayed, if I told you, he'd ruin you. Not just your work, not just the company. He promised he'd destroy everything you touched. And Daniel, he meant it. I saw enough to believe him." Her eyes burned, but she kept them open. "So I left. I disappeared. It was the only way to protect you, to protect them." For a long moment, the corridor was silent except for the low hum of lights and the distant cough of another patient. Daniel's jaw worked, his fists curling, then unclenching. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and trembling with fury. 7 years. You carried this alone for 7 years. I thought it was right," she said, her voice breaking. He turned toward the glass window, staring into the room where the twins slept side by side, their small faces softened in rest. "They should have known me," he whispered. The words shattered her. She leaned against the wall, pressing her forehead to the cold plaster. "I know," she whispered back, "but I was afraid." Daniel turned sharply, his voice rough. "Not anymore. No one, least of all Victor, will keep me from them now." Before Lena could reply, a vibration cut through the silence. Her phone, tucked in her pocket, buzzed against her palm. She pulled it out with unsteady fingers. An unknown number. The message was short, precise. You should have stayed gone. Another followed seconds later. Leave Chicago. Tonight, or you'll regret it. Her breath hitched. The screen slipped slightly in her grip as she turned it toward Daniel. His face darkened, his jaw set like stone. Victor. For 7 years, his name had been a ghost she whispered in fear. Now it had followed her back into the light. Daniel took the phone from her, his grip steady even as his pulse thundered. He's not going to scare you anymore, he said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. Not you. Not them. Lena closed her eyes, torn between terror and something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Because for the first time since she left, she wasn't standing against Victor alone. The message lingered on Lena's phone long after the screen dimmed. You should have stayed gone. The words sat like ice in her chest. Daniel hadn't flinched. He had taken the phone from her, placed it in his coat pocket, and simply said, I'll handle this. But Victor never let anything go quietly. 2 days later, the storm had passed, but the city felt colder still. News spread quickly, an anonymous leak to the tabloids. Daniel Hayes spotted with unidentified woman and 2 children, leaving hospital late at night. Photographs blurred by snow but unmistakable. Headlines bloomed like weeds. Speculation, accusations, whispers about scandal. In the penthouse, Lena sat at the kitchen table with the paper spread open before her, the twins in the next room coloring quietly. Her hands shook as she folded the page. This is him, she whispered. Victor. He's forcing you. Daniel poured coffee into a mug with deliberate calm. Then he's forgotten who I am. He won't stop. Neither will I. The phone rang before she could reply. Daniel answered, his voice clipped. On the other end, Victor's tone oozed satisfaction. I warned you, brother. You think you can parade her back into town, along with her little souvenirs, without consequence? The board is already asking questions. Investors don't like uncertainty. Daniel's jaw tightened. They're not souvenirs. They're my children. A pause crackled on the line, then a low laugh. So you've decided to claim them? Bold. But you'll lose everything. Do you really think anyone will trust a man who hid an affair, illegitimate children, lies stacked on lies? Step aside. Leave this city. Take her back into whatever hole she crawled out of, and I'll forget this ever happened. Daniel's silence was heavy, dangerous. Or, he asked finally, or I'll bury you. Victor's voice was ice. Just like I buried her 7 years ago. The call ended abruptly. The dial tone hummed in the quiet room. Lena's face had gone pale, her breath shallow. You can't fight him. He controls everything. Daniel turned to her, and for the first time in years, his eyes were stripped of restraint. Not anymore. He's controlled me long enough. It ends now. The press conference was announced less than 48 hours later. The media swarmed the marble lobby of Hayes and West Properties, cameras flashing under chandeliers, reporters shouting over one another. Daniel stood at the podium, Lena just behind him, the twins waiting with a trusted aide in a quiet room nearby. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing through the cavernous hall. For years, I have allowed silence to define too much of my life. That silence ends today. Flashbulbs flared. I stand here not only as CEO of this company, but as a father. Yes, those children you have seen are mine. They are not a scandal, not a liability, not a secret. They are my family, and I will not allow anyone, family or otherwise, to threaten them. Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. The name Victor West hung unspoken, but present, heavy as lead. Behind him, Lena's breath caught. She had expected him to shield, to maneuver, to find some discreet solution. Not this. Not to stand before the city, stripped of protection, and choose them. When he stepped aside, she found herself moving forward before she realized it. The microphone loomed, cold metal catching the light. Her voice trembled, but she spoke anyway. 7 years ago, I disappeared. Not because I wanted to, because I was forced. I was threatened, cornered, told that if I stayed, the man I loved would be destroyed. I believed those threats. I raised my children in silence, in fear. But I am done being afraid. The room erupted, questions hurled, cameras thrust forward. But she stepped back, clutching the edge of the podium, her eyes finding Daniel's. His hand closed over hers briefly, steadying. For the first time in years, she wasn't carrying the burden alone. That night, across the city, Victor hurled the morning paper across his desk, his face twisted in fury. The headlines were merciless. Hayes confirms twins as his heir. Stock prices ticked upward, not down. Sympathy poured in, not scorn. For the first time, Victor felt power slip from his grasp. And Daniel, standing in the quiet of the penthouse, watching his children sleep, knew he had crossed a line that could never be undone. The war with Victor was no longer in shadows. It was open. It was final. And he was ready. The fallout came swiftly. Within days of the press conference, whispers of Victor's corruption turned into headlines. Investigative reporters unearthed years of hidden accounts, bribes, and falsified contracts. Board members who had once cowered under his influence now stepped forward, eager to distance themselves. Daniel didn't need to destroy his stepbrother. Victor had already done that himself. All Daniel did was shine a light. By the end of the week, Victor's office was stripped bare. His nameplate removed, his authority dissolved. The empire he had wielded like a weapon slipped through his fingers, piece by piece, until he was nothing more than a shadow in a tailored suit, escorted out of the building by security guards who refused to meet his eye. For Daniel, it should have felt like victory. But as he stood at the window of his office, watching snow fall into the Chicago River, all he felt was stillness. Revenge had never been the point. The only thing that mattered was the family waiting for him at home. Weeks passed. The storm was long gone, the city shifting into late winter gray. One evening, Daniel led Lena and the twins through a quiet street lined with old brick townhouses. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, the sidewalks still dusted with snow. He stopped before a 3-story building with ivy clinging to its walls, freshly restored but warm, inviting. The windows glowed with soft light. "What is this?" Lena asked, her voice cautious. Daniel unlocked the gate and pushed it open. "Your new home," he said simply. Her brow furrowed. "Daniel, it's not charity," he interrupted gently. "It's a beginning. For you. For them. For us, if you'll let it be." The twins had already run ahead, their small boots thudding against the polished wood floors. Their laughter echoed through the hall, mingling with the creak of the old staircase and the faint hum of radiators. Lena stood in the doorway, her scarf still wrapped tight, her body caught between wonder and disbelief. "You renovated this?" she whispered. Daniel nodded. "It's the first in a project I've been planning for a long time. A program to restore townhouses like this for families who need them. You're the first. Not because you're charity, but because you're proof it can work." Her throat tightened. She looked away, blinking fast. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said quietly. "Because somewhere in the chaos of boardrooms and skyscrapers, I forgot what mattered. I thought I'd buried the past. But then I saw you, saw them, and I realized the future wasn't something I could build alone." The twins' voices floated down the stairs. "Mom, come see our room." Lena let out a soft, helpless laugh. Tears slipped free, hot against her cold skin. She stepped inside at last. Later that night, when the children were asleep in beds that didn't creak or groan, Lena stood by the window, looking out at the city. Daniel joined her quietly, his reflection beside hers in the glass. "They love it here," she said softly. "So do I." Silence stretched between them, not heavy this time, but gentle. A silence that no longer hid secrets, only possibility. Daniel looked at her then, really looked. The woman who had survived storms alone, who had carried burdens too heavy, who had still managed to keep 2 children safe and loved. He reached out, his hand brushing hers against the cold glass. She didn't pull away. For the first time in years, Lena allowed herself to believe in something fragile, something terrifying, something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. And Daniel, standing with her, realized that the empire he had built meant little compared to this. Two children breathing steadily upstairs, a woman beside him, and the quiet certainty that the future no longer felt like a cage, felt like a home. The townhouse was quiet, the kind of quiet that only came when children finally surrendered to sleep. Daniel lingered in the hall, listening to the muffled rhythm of their breathing behind closed doors. As he turned to leave, a small voice broke the stillness. "Good night, Dad." It was barely a whisper, drowsy and uncertain, but it stopped him where he stood. The boy's eyes peeked out from under the blanket, shining in the glow of the night light. His sister stirred beside him, murmuring the word too, softer still. "Night, Dad." For a moment Daniel couldn't speak. His throat tightened, his hand braced against the doorframe. He swallowed hard, then stepped inside, kneeling beside their bed. "Good night," he whispered back, his voice rough but steady. "Sleep well. I'm here." The children's eyes closed again, their breathing even, their trust absolute. Daniel stood there long after, watching them. For the first time in his life, the word father didn't feel like a burden or a title. It felt like the truth. And as he returned to the window where Lena waited, he knew. The future no longer belonged to the empire he had built, or the battles he had won. It belonged here, in this home, in the fragile, fierce love of a family finally found.